Oh, hey you bodacious gals and guys. Welcome to a totally tubular Regal mystery movie review. What was this week's radical movie? It was Lisa Frankenstein, a coming-of-age love story about a misunderstood teenager and a reanimated Victorian corpse. After a set of horrific circumstances brings him back to life, they embark on a murderous journey together to find love, happiness, and a few missing body parts.
Rated PG-13.
When I first saw the preview for this movie, I was immediately hooked. It looked like a fun comedy horror movie. This movie is a directorial debut for Zelda Williams, who was the daughter of the late and great Robin Williams. So basically what we have is a girl meets monster, monster needs body parts, and chaos ensues. The main character is Lisa, played by Kathryn Newton from Ant-Man Quantumania. She's kind of a more outgoing goth girl character. It's like if you took Winona Ryder's character from Edward Scissorhands and combined it with Winona Ryder's character from Beetlejuice into one person. Cole Sprouse plays the creature, and he does a fantastic job of conveying his emotions without speaking. Some other actors you may recognize is Carla Gugino from House on Haunted Hill or Midnight Mass. She plays the stereotypical overbearing stepmom who's just kind of self-obsessed and really tries to manipulate the people around her. The father is played by Joe Crest, who also plays a father on Stranger Things. The non-involved father who's just kind of there to nod his head and say yes to his wife. The sister is played by Lisa Soberano, who is very sweet and very nice. She's always willing to share her clothes and makeup and give tips to Lisa. As I mentioned before, Lisa is kind of a character who's really obsessed with the macabre. She has this fascination with death. She spends a lot of her free time at an abandoned graveyard, and she's still adjusting to her new life with a new sister and a new stepmom. She's especially smitten with the tombstone of a young man. She spends most of her time there with him, reading him poetry, and just kind of talking to the bust that's on top of his tombstone. She kind of falls in love with the idea of him, not so much him. And this kind of lends itself to a very hilarious exchange between the creature and Lisa, where the creature thinks that she's in love with him because she said that she wants to be with him. But in reality, she wanted to be with him in the ground dead, because she would rather be around the dead instead of the living. So obviously the basic premise of this movie is that you have Lisa, who creates her own Frankenstein-like monster using the corpse of this reanimated Victorian young man. She does this with her minimal sewing skills and a faulty tanning bed. I think the movie does a really good job of balancing the whimsy of her just kind of sewing body parts onto him and then zapping them in the faulty tanning bed to make those body parts come to life. But then Lisa also has to deal with the consequences of these actions because the police are circling around her the whole time trying to figure out why are all these people dying. I found the humor of the movie to be pretty on point for a PG-13 film. The movie is about teenagers, so there is a little bit of that crude teenager type of humor. Now, I was surprised by a couple of the jokes, not because I was offended, just because I was surprised to hear a joke about a period or a contraceptive sponge. The action of the movie is also very PG-13. Even though people are being dismembered, it's not really in-your-face blood and gore. There's some blood here and there, and most of the violence is implied, which I think works perfectly well for this film. There are people who have reviewed this movie who think that it would have worked better as a rated R film. I would have to disagree. I don't think a rated R film would have kept up with the kind of teenage fantasy that this movie was offering. I feel like if you went rated R, it'd be too violent, too gory, and you would lose part of the charm that kind of made this movie fun. One of the standouts for me in this film is the 80s vibe. Now, sometimes when films or TV shows try to give you an 80s feel, they usually just throw things at you to kind of feed your nostalgia. For example, in Stranger Things Season 2, everything was just kind of in your face 80s. Like, hey, look at this, you remember this?
Wow.
Or hey, what about that?
Wow.
Everything was just kind of thrown at you to kind of force you to eat this 80s nostalgia bait. It felt really artificial. This movie, however, does not have that. The characters feel like they're living and breathing in an 80s house, in an 80s school. It just has that perfect 80s feel to me. You got big hair, chunky jewelry, chunky furniture, pastel houses. even those little precious moments ceramic dolls. You really felt immersed in this world, like this is a movie from the 80s and not from 2024. Now, there was an 80s outfit montage, but again, it was done in the same vein as an 80s montage would have been done. It wasn't overly produced, it wasn't tongue-in-cheek, it was just a really strict reconstruction of an 80s moment. Now, of course, the movie has an 80s soundtrack as well. Now, it's not full of all the general 80s pop hits that you would expect to have in an 80s movie. Instead, it has some more dark and broody pop songs that you may not recognize. I know I didn't recognize some of the music, but I was definitely rocking out to Depeche Mode's Enjoy the Silence. Now, I wouldn't have minded some of the more pop culture 80s music if we kind of framed it around being in Taffy's car when she's driving Lisa around, because I do feel like she would definitely enjoy more of the pop hits, more so than Lisa. But I do think that the music plays really well with Lisa's dark and depressed and just kind of weird behaviors. So this kind of leads me to some of the sound issues that I experienced while watching the movie. Sometimes you could definitely tell that the lines were dubbed post-production, and they just didn't really fit with what the characters were doing. There's also some issues where the dubs were very softly spoken, so if you were laughing at like a previous line, you would miss the next line because it was just so soft. And some of these dubs just didn't really feel necessary. Like, you didn't need to add an extra line to this conversation. The general reception for this movie was pretty good. People in the audience were laughing. They really enjoyed the humor. I did hear some people wince at some of the violence that was shown. But again, it's PG-13, so you're not going to see a lot of blood and gore. So now for my rating. I would give Lisa Frankenstein an 8 out of 10. While I do appreciate the fantastic 80s world building that this film shows, it's not quite an original idea. There have been a ton of Frankenstein monster type movies made over the years, although I do think that this is definitely one of the better ones. So if you're looking for a fun time, this is the movie for you. So did you see the totally bad to the bone movie, Lisa Frankenstein? If so, totally chill out in the comments below and tell me all about it. So don't be grody and go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe for more gnarly and bodacious content just like this. Smell you later.